We'll start off with the, as usual, the learning sponsors, and then we're going to go into the Gemara today. Okay? All right.
I'll listen, maybe. You're the only one that does that.
Really?
I haven't heard it anywhere else since we came back to shul.
Yeah, well, I was doing it on the line, on Zoom too. Whoop. Learning sponsors, a year of learning, Sue and Arnie Garlick in memory of Malka Proman and Philip Mann. And Yisrael David ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch and Beryl ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch. Yosef Meir ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch and Yerivka Pro Rosna Bas Harav Tzvi Hirsch. In a memory of family murdered in the Holocaust. Harav Tzvi Hirsch ben Shlomo Yaakov, Sarah bat Ephraim, Yisrael David ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Ephraim ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Adia bat Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Miriam bat Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Pesel bat Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Shalom ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Shlomo Yaakov ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Shmuel ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, shall share her children and grandchildren in memory of her uncle, founding member of BRS, Dr. Israel Brook, Yisrael ben Harav Akiva, Marcia Federbush and family, in memory of her husband, Dr. Oriel Paul Federbush, Oriel Pinchas ben Harav Shimon, Sharon and Fred Lisker, their family and many friends. In memory of her dear mom, Harriet Friedman, Edelbas Yaakov, Leslie and Gail Kaplan, in memory of their parents, Harry and Marjorie Sedell, Irving and Pearl Kaplan. Friends of Avi Gidler, Avrameir ben Shimon, Martha Gidler, Charna Bas Yeshaya. Friends of Toby Peres, Sarah Tova Bat Yisrael Dov. Friends of Malka Levy, Malka Bat Yosef. Friends of Joe Wolf, Yosef ben Chaim. Charlie Gelfenstein and Sam Levine, in memory of Ramona Levine, Rachel Mata Bas Asher. Have a month of learning by Dov Budlander in memory of his wife Udal Bas Yehuda Tzvi. Mordechai and Miriam Burr in memory of his father, Yaakov ben Mordechai. Friends from Yarmouth E, in memory of Miriam and Michael Schiffer's son, Zev David ben Shimon Halevi. David and Mindel Cheslow, in memory of his mother, Bela Bas Meir. I have, and that is it for today. And then Shamas have an Aliyah, Crank Rafia, Velti Yashir, Shema Tliya, and Machol B'nai Yisrael, a good Gaben Shtiar. Okay.
Amen.
All right. It's just all right. According to the Daf Yomi official commission Luach, we should be on Yud Bet today.
Yeah, good bet. Good bet.
It's a good bet for Yud Bet. Okay.
Yeah. And when are we, where are we?
On Yud Bet.
Okay.
Okay. All right.
Suffering from Dafioni withdrawal.
Okay. Okay.
Good days.
Actually, I hate to say it, but I enjoyed the morning off yesterday. I got to listen to 2 other shiurim from somebody else. Right?
No coffee.
Yeah, I don't drink coffee, so it's not an issue for me. Right? Okay, I'm going to have us go back to the bottom of Yud Aleph Amud Aleph. Right? Not because I assume that the people did not do it, but because I believe that we can get it done today. And, okay. Right? Okay. On Yud Aleph Amud Aleph, I'm going to start. Yud Aleph Amud Beis, I'm sorry. Yud Aleph Amud Beis. Okay. About 9 lines up from the bottom of the Amud. Zeh HaKlal, right. That's the place. Okay. Zeh Eli v'yanveh v'atneh alav b'mitzvot. Right. The Gemara is then going to pick up. All right, I got to do it for myself too, because I prepared it all back on Friday. Who knows if I still remember it, right?
Where are we?
We're on Yud Aleph Amud Beis, about 9. No, Yud Aleph Amud Beis, okay, 2 dots, about 9 lines from the bottom. I'm going to use that quickly as a review to get into today,
Paragraph 14.
which is Yud Bet. Okay. All right. So Zach Kol Davar Shemikabel Tuma Chule. Okay. Minahani Mili asks the Gemara. Amar Reish Lakish Makra. Ve'ed Ya'alem min haaretz ma'ed davar she'eno mikabel tum'ah. So citing the pasuk, right, from, if I remember correctly, Breshit, sounds good, right? Right, so that's the point. What is this issue pertaining to? He says as follows, right? Right. Okay, ma'ed davar she'eno mikabel tum'ah v'gidulo min haaretz. The same way this aid, want to call it a mist, you want to call it something else, like fog, okay, all right. The same way it's not susceptible to tumah, and it is not connected, doesn't grow from the earth.
It is.
Okay, I'm sorry, it rises, it comes up from the earth. Let's put it that way. Af sukkah, davar she'en mikabel tum'ah, v'gidulo min haaretz. So likewise, for the sukkah, we're talking about something that is not susceptible to tumah, and it comes up, it grows, in this case, from the earth. Hanech lemanda amar ananei kavod havu. That's acceptable for those who argued that when they were traveling, that these clouds were covering them and protecting them, etc. But according to the fact of those who say that they did build actual fabricated certain kinds of facilities as part of their travel, okay? My ikalamema. What are we going to say? Titania, as taught in the Braita again, ki besukot hoshavti et bnei Yisrael, because I made them dwell in booths, okay, for the children of Israel. Ananei kavod hayu. Some say they were these clouds of glory. Divrei Rabbi Eliezer. That's the view of Rabbi Eliezer. And Rabbi Akiva Omer, Sukkot mamash asu lahem, that he actually made them dwell in Sukkot. Hanechele Rabbi Eliezer. That's acceptable to the view of Rabbi Eliezer because he argued on an kavod. Elul Rabbi Akiva ma'ika lemema. So what are you going to say about the view of Rabbi Akiva? Right? Okay, who said that was mamash, really sukkahs. Right? So what happens? We now continue. Ki ata Rav Dimi. When Rav Dimi came, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Okay, he said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan. What did he say? Amar Kra. There is a pasuk. Chag haSukkot ta'aseh lecha. That you shall make these sukkot. Right? Makish sukkah lechagiga. And he makes an association between the sukkah and the festival peace offering. Ma chagiga davar she'eno mikabel tum'ah v'gidulo min haaretz. The same way that the chagiga, right, the holiday peace offering, okay, was something that was not susceptible to tumah, and it came from what? Okay, and it was something that, well, you could say living animal. I like to say it was nourished from the earth.
No, the first,
Right.
that it's not susceptible to tumah.
Right, because it's a
so
living
raw.
animal, right? Okay, and then it was right, nourishing it. Af sukkah, so likewise sukkah, davar she'eno mikabel tum'ah v'gidulo min haaretz. Okay, so that's right. That was how the animal was nourished. That's why you can't conceptually.
Right.
All right. Okay. So having said that, the Gemara then completes the thought okay, with the same, on that perspective, ma chagiga ba'alei chayim. So here's what Michael was hinting to us, the same way that it is a living animal, and that's why it does not get tuma, not susceptible to tuma. Afsuka nami ba'alei chayim. Okay, so likewise the sukkah, okay,
Should also be valid.
okay, should also be made living things, no? In other words, maybe we should be using animal hides, is the point of the Gemara, okay, for the covering of the sukkah,
Right.
okay? All right, no, we don't do that, okay? So what happens? Ki ata Ravin, when Ravin came, okay? Amar Rabbi Yochanan, again, he said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Amar Kra. Okay, citing a different source, right? Ba'asvacha migarnecha umeyikvecha, right? And you're gathering it from the threshing floor and from the wine vat. Okay, now what do we usually find on the floor of the threshing floor? Okay, is the implication what? Vegetative stuff, right? Okay, so what happens? Bipsolet goren. V'yekev hakatuv medaber, says the text of the Gemara. From that which is remained from grain produce, okay, and from the vat, right? That is what the text, the Torah text is telling about. Ve'ema, and therefore I might say, goren atzmo, v'yekev atzmo. Maybe I need to take those things directly, okay, for the what's left there on the floor of the threshing house and what's there from the gat, from the wine press, maybe the wine vat, maybe that stuff. Maybe I need segment of wine, or maybe
Grain itself.
it's grain, right? All right. Amar Rabbi Zera. What does Rabbi Zera tell us? Yekev kativ kan ve'i efshar l'sachech bo. It says Yekev. You're talking about, okay, the threshing floor itself. You can't cover things that are there, little tiny pieces from the grain or pieces of segment of wine from the vat. You can't use those to cover. Prischach, okay? Matkifla Rabbi Yirmiyah. But Rabbi Yirmiyah challenges him with the following. Ve'ema, and I might say, Yayin Karush Haba Mishneir, all right, or Misneir. Okay, maybe I'm talking about using congealed wine that comes from a certain location. Okay, you can imagine that. All right, Shehu Domeh le'igulei dvela, because it's so congealed that it's similar to the fig cakes. Okay, in other words, it's fairly thick. Okay, and therefore that could be put. All right. Amar Rabbi Zera, says Rabbi Zera, ha milta hava bidan. Okay, what is he telling us? All right, namely, okay, this, he says, we've got, in other words, when you say, I've got it in my hand, in other words, we have a handle on this, is what we might use in colloquial English. Okay, that's what he's telling us. V'hamilta hava biyada, va'ata Rabbi Yirmiyah. Okay, and Rabbi Yirmiyah came, v'shada be'garna. And what did he do? What did he do? He would chop off the hand with an axe. Okay, Rav Ashyama migarnecha. He says when it says from the threshing floor, velo goren atzmo, and not the floor itself. Miyekvecha, from the wine vat, velo yekev atzmo, and not the vat itself. Rav Chisda Amar Mehacha, and Rav Chisda, however, is going to give us a slightly different source, okay, for the two for Skach. Amar from here, Tsu'u, right, Hahar, Ve'eviu alai Zayit, Va'alai Eitz Shemen, Va'alai Hadas, Va'alei Marim, Va'alei Eitz Avot. Okay, it's a long pasuk. Go out to the mountain and bring me what he means branches of olive leaves, leaves of the oil tree. right? Myrtle leaves, palm leaves, leaves of the braided tree, okay? Implying that he should use these, okay, to make the sukkah, right? So what happens? The Gemara goes on. Hainu hadas,
I knew it's over.
right? Here, this is the hadas. Hainu eitz avot. Here we have the other tree, the myrtle tree, the braided tree. Amar Rav Chisda, furthermore, hadas, okay, shote l'sukkah. Okay, what is he telling us here? All right, clearly he wants us to understand that what? That the branches are for the tree, right?
If they're mishulash, they're for the lulav, and if they're
Right,
not,
not,
they're
okay.
not. shot.
Right, so in other words, why, well, let's come back before to tie into what Michael's suggestion is. Why is it called irregular? What does it mean? ArtScroll gives the translation irregular, okay? What we want to understand is you could have branches that are required for the lulav, for the arba minim, okay? That's one kind of a hadas branch. But you might have branches that are not fit for the arba minim, but instead they could be used for the schach. So that's why I'm suggesting that ArtScroll translated it irregular, okay? He's got a long note there, but I'm saying that's the point, okay? They base that on,
Not the normal ones.
right, okay? So that's why he says Hadash Shoteh L'Sukkah, the Eitz Avot Lulav, right? Right? And the braided, the regular branches are for the lulav, okay?
So how do we know we could use something else?
Well, that's a good question. We base it still on that pasuk. What else did that pasuk just say? Right?
Mention specific.
It says other kinds of branches, olive branches, right? Myrtle branches, palm leaves, okay? All right. Right. I give you a quick example, right? You remember you can't have anything attached to it, okay? So I can remember years ago when I, in another community, I used to take my sons, we used to go on a sukkah hop, you know, go visiting every people's sukkah. So they once went without me to the sukkah of my assistant rabbi. Okay. And they found that he had berries still attached to the, okay. So they came back to me, what?
To what?
To the-
To the schach. They were- Okay. Right. So they came back to me and they asked, do we tell them that that's not appropriate or not? Okay. I said to him, I said, was it, there's a branches from pine trees? And was it pine cones? Pine cones would not be appropriate, right? If it was pine cones. But the berries, okay,
What's wrong with pine cones? You're not allowed to use something if it will rot and. fall
pine
off.
cones are not acceptable. I'm telling you from living up in, okay,
In pine.
pine area countries, right? Okay. So the point is, they weren't sure if it was their place to tell him, okay, from what they had learned. Anyway, let's come back. All right, Matt Neaton. Okay, let's go to a new Mishnah. Okay, we're still dealing with schach, right? Okay, we can all relate to this issue. Okay, if you have, okay, I think of the fact that some people used to have those bamboo, right, that roll up and tie, bamboo mats, okay? Or you think of that sometimes when you finish up sukkah, you take, if you don't have the mat, you may have, one year I had just individual bamboo poles,
Individual band.
all right? And I used, at the end of sukkahs, I used to tie them, okay, as a bundle. So now what happens, I would put them on the sukkah. I have to untie the bundle so that the individual bamboo poles would hopefully spread out. I can relate to now what the Mishnah is telling us. Chavile kash, bundles of straw. V'chavile etzim, or bundles of wood. V'chavile zradim, or bundles of, let's say, twigs. All right? Ein misachachin behen, we do not use them for schach. V'chulan shehetiran ksherot. And once we've released them, they, right, untied them, they are valid. The kulan ksherot v'dafno, and they are all acceptable for the walls. Gemara, Amar Rabbi Yaakov, he says as
What does it
follows.
mean if it's meant into a, if they're tied up, but you can have.
So that's
not
why,
individuals, but they are tied up. Can you?
that's why I'm,
You
the
can
point is,
untie it.
you've got, if it's a bundle, like, that's why I gave the difference. If it's these bamboo mats that are made,
So that's-
those are acceptable.
that's not-
Okay.
Why are those acceptable?
They have to have.
What? According to some, they're
if they're not
acceptable.
a- If you buy the mats from Thailand that are used as floor mats.
That's a
or-
problem.
Those are not, but if they're made l'shem schach,
Scott,
we'll
that's,
discover in a little while that it can be tied together.
right. So that's, we're going to see.
It'll
But
be
the
any
point we
tomorrow.
said that the individual bamboo poles that were tied together, one could not use as a bundle.
But you cannot buy mats and use them as.
You can if they have a.
It's the point is, were they made l'shem mitzvah? Think of it that way. Okay, so Amar Rabbi Yaakov, Shamat Mina, the Rabbi Yochanan Tarte. From this, we learn that Rabbi Yochanan, all right, two Mishnaic rulings. Chada ha, one is this, ve'idach, and the other, achotet begadish. Okay, one who, let's say, I want to say has a haystack, and they remove part of the haystack,
Dig out.
all right, dig it out, they hollow it out part of the haystack. What happens? La sot lo sukkah, eina sukkah. And that is not considered a valid sukkah. Right? Why? Chada mishum gzerat otzar. He says one is because of what we might call, how do I want to translate?
Bundling for storage.
Yeah, okay, but there's a different sense I want to convey here. One is because one of the fact is that, all right, let's say storage for the moment, all right? There's a different concept I want to come back to. V'chada mishum ta'aseh v'la lo min ha'asur. And the other prohibition is because it says you shall make it and not use which is already made, okay? V'lo yad'ana, I minaihu mishum otzar, v'ai minaihu mishum ta'aseh v'lo min ha'asur. But then he admits, I don't remember, I don't know which rationale went to which situation. Okay? Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah, says Rabbi Yirmiyah, Nechazei Anam. Let's examine the situation, he says. The Amar Rabbi Chia bar Abba, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Says Rabbi Chia in the name of Rabbi Yochanan. Mipnei ma amru, chavilei kash, v'chavilei eitzim, v'chavilei zradim. On what basis did they say that bundles of straw, okay, or bundles of twigs, or bundles of wood, right? Ein misachachin bahem, that we cannot use them for the schach. Pa'amim she'adam ba min hasadeh. There are times when a person comes from the field, ba'erev in the evening, v'chavilato al ktefo, and he's got this large bundle that he's carried on his shoulder. And what does he do? Uma'aleh umanicha al gabei sukato, and he raises it and he puts it down on his, I'm going to use the word shed here for the moment as a translation for sukato, right? Kedei liyavsha, in order for them to dry, right? V'nimlach, and he changes his mind, nimlach aleh, l'sichuch, and afterwards he decides he's going to spread them out and use it for the schach to make that, right? What?
Leave it, not spread it.
okay, for his scarf. Vahatorah amra, and the Torah here says, ta'aseh velo min ha'asui, to make it and not from what has already been made. Midaha, from here, mishum gzerat otza. From here, we would also learn about the decree in regarding storage. Ha, mishum ta'aseh velo min ha'asui. And here, we also learn from doing it, not from what's pre-made. Okay, Rabbi Yaakov, and according to Rabbi Yaakov, right? Hach the Rabbi Chia bar Abba lo shamiale. This lesson from Rabbi Chia bar Abba, we don't learn it from here. Okay, Amar Rav Ashi, and so Rav Ashi says as follows: Atu chavile kash v'chavile etzi. Since we're talking about bundles of straw and bundles of wood, mishum gzerat otsar ika. Okay, it's possible here that because of the decree of storage, that applies here. Mishum ta'aseh velo ha'asui leka. Would we say then that as the rationale for prohibiting such use, is it based on the command that you make it not from what is made, and that's not viable here? That's not the situation. What about the following? Our Mishnah said, "V'hachotet begadish," one who hollows out the haystack. Mishum ta'aseh v'lo min ha'asui ika. From here, we clearly have a statement of making it not from something that's made. Right, that I have here. Mishum gzerat otsar leka. But what we say from the issue of storage, we don't have an issue here. The Rabbi Yochanan Amarlach. Rabbi Yochanan would therefore tell us the following. What would he tell us? Hacha, excuse me. Tikatani ein mesachachin bahem. But here it's clear that the Mishnah says we do not cover with them. Lechatchilahu de'ein. Right? Initially, ein mesachachim. Why? Mishum gzerat otsar, because of the decree of possible storage. Right? Ha deoraita shapir dami. Why? Because here, actually from the Torah, okay, it would be suitable. Hatam. But there, okay, in our other case, the katani einas sukkah afilu diavad. But there, where it's not even a sukkah after the fact, right? That's the right, like in looking for a needle, right? Midoraita nami einas sukkah. All right, here clearly, all right, we say that it's not a sukkah. Okay, all right.
The
needle in the haystack.
So you come back from the field and you have a bundle of straw, a bundle of whatever.
Right.
Or sugar stock, but it's wet.
Right.
So, but you're planning on using it as stock, but there's nothing wrong with putting it on top of your shed or whatever you're gonna make, as long as it's in your mind that it's gonna be stocked, and just have it dry out there.
That's fine.
That would be a good example, okay, of what the Gemara was suggesting, Gary, that says that he changed his mind, okay? In other words, initially, right, but the point is, your point was that his intent initially was, I'm going to put it up there so that once it's dry, I can use it.
Normally, when you bring in a bunch of straw from a field, it's to feed your animals. But here, in your case, he brought it l'shem stock l'katila.
Okay,
That would be fine.
okay,
And
now.
you could even leave it in bundles to the which is a mat.
Nami ikas. Okay, now we're going to get to a new example. And I have to tell you that I think the little drawing, the little diagram on 12B1 opposite note number 4 in Art Scroll may be a better image than what they did in the Koran, okay? In terms of what's the difference between a male and a female arrow head, okay, and arrow, right? The implication is one kind of, if I remember, stalk of the arrow, okay, shaft, right, fits in to the arrowhead. That's what they're suggesting is the male. Okay, the other is that the arrowhead, okay, goes into the shaft. Okay. All right. Okay. Now. Okay. And no jokes here. Now you got little kids. All right. Okay. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav. Okay. Now, why one would use arrow shafts for their skach, I don't
Well, the
understand.
point is that pshuta shalates.
That could be
I mean, it's just using it as an example.
example, right? Okay.
But wouldn't the arrow shaft be a cleat?
Yes, but it's a pshuta shalate. That's just a straight dowel. You could use
The
dowels.
dowels?
1x3 because they don't have a base keyboard.
Right. Okay.
That's the point.
All right. That's the point. Okay. So let's see what the Gemara tells us. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav. Sachacha b'chitzin zicharim. He used male arrows. All right. Kshera. That is valid. B'nekevot. With female arrows, psula. Then that skach is not valid. Zicharim kshera pshita. That the male arrows are valid, that's obvious. Mahu detim. What then are you trying to tell us? Nigzor zicharim atu nekevot. We might have thought to make a decree and say any kind of arrows are not valid, even male arrows, because of the female arrows. Kamash Malan comes to teach us that's not the case. Okay. Amar Mar, b'nekevot b'sula. The master said that with female arrows, it is invalid. Pshita, isn't that obvious? Mahu detema. What does he want us to know? Beit kibul ha'asui limalaot. Okay, we say that is a receptacle. Okay, that is prepared to be fulfilled. Okay, right? Lo shame kibu. Okay, but isn't that, you might think, well, maybe that is not really the kind of receptacle that we're talking about. Kamash Malan comes to Gemara, comes to teach us that that is the case. It is a valid receptacle. Okay, going on. Amar Rabba Bar Barchana, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Sachacha ba'anitse pishtan. Okay, he's now wants to try to use for schach bundles of combed flax. Okay, now here Koren did have some good notes and pictures where it showed, number one, flax really comes from something that grows in the ground. Okay, but what about the fact that it has to be processed? All this, and that's what we're going to get into. And then when it's combed, that's part of the processing. Okay, it comes out, okay, as let's call it strands, right? Okay, so what happens? We go on. So what is the issue? Pishtan, right? Sachacha ba'anitse pishtan. All right, if he tried to use this comb flax, psula, right? It is invalid. Bahotzne pishtan ktsera. But if we want to use, let's say,
Flax plants.
okay, well, it could be plants, stalks. It could be a question of if it's soaked or if it's beaten, right? Right? Vahushne pishtan, beaten flax. Mahu. in that case, I don't know what it is. Okay, so the Gemara says, Voshne atzman, okay, eini yodea, right? And when you say it is the beaten flax or the crushed flax, I don't know. My nafsh, what's the difference? Idayek, if we say that it's crushed and not combed, velo nafitz, okay, and it's not beaten, okay, right, combed, hosheni karele, then we would call it simply the crushed, okay, pre-processed. Avaltare, but once it's soaked, velo diyek, and it's not really crushed, okay, yet, even though it's not combed, right? Hotzne karele, I would call that a different process, perhaps. Odilma tare velo diyek, or perhaps it was soaked and not crushed, okay? Nami hoshani karele. Here too, I would say it was perhaps combed, right? Va'amar Rab Yehuda.
It's interesting, it doesn't say tefu, or it doesn't say kasha,
Right,
it just goes right there.
right. So what happens is, okay, we're, again, Corin's note, if you're interested, has a long note on the whole process of what was involved in dealing with flax to help try to clarify why was it that the Gemara here gives us 3 or 4 different stages of the processing, because it did take considerable processing exactly to go from the plant, okay, or the raw plant, okay, to something that was a cloth.
Right.
Okay, it meant stripping, it meant soaking, it meant combing, crushing, pounding, removing seeds, things like that.
The main thing is that clothing is makabel tumah and can't be used. So thread, this almost thread is it's considered like clothing if it was really thread.
Right.
The question is, in this stage of the
It also helps us.
There's also an issue Rashi brings up, that as far as Rashi is concerned, once you start processing, it's asid yirais. Others interpret this as an isur derabanan atu begadim.
Okay.
So b'di'evet, what would be the deal if I invite you to my sukkah and I have partially crushed flax? Are you going to accept the invitation?
I would just point out, remember also that given this process, okay, you also had a marked difference in, you mentioned begadim, and the clothes was the fact that in Egypt, they wore generally more linen garments, whereas in Eretz Yisrael, they wore more wool, coarser garments, okay, in terms of what was available, but in the processing and things like that.
Above all that, lots of flax.
Okay. Amar Rav Yehuda. All right, so Rav Yehuda is going to say now, Hani Shushe V'Shavtsare. Okay, different translations. One wants to say it's ferns. Others wants to say it's sagebrush or wormwood. Okay, other kinds of things. All right. Licorice. Yeah. All right. Amar Rab Shrai Mesachachin Baho, that it's permitted to use them for scotch. Abaye Amar B'Shushe Mesachachin B'Shavtsare Lo Mesachachin. All right. Abaye says with one kind it's permitted to use as chach. Another kind, in other words, his argument is with licorice it's permitted, with wormwood it's not. Right? I'm sorry, the opposite, right? Mesachachim, with wormwood it's permitted, with licorice it's not. Now,
No, it's backwards. It's backwards. Because licorice,
realize that
one can use.
licorice is a plant from which you derive
A flavor.
items that actually are used to make what?
Licorice.
Well, it's besides candy, but it's also used in medicine and other kinds of things.
And you can buy from Australia real licorice, made from licorice.
Okay,
Yeah, Abaya says with licorice leaves, you can roof. With wormwood leaves, you cannot.
nice giving.
Therefore, that's the reason you'll run out of the sugar.
Right, that's what the Gemara is going to tell us. Ma'itama kevan desare riche, says the Gemara, as Sid just pointed out. Why don't we use that? It has right, an offensive odor. So what happens? Okay, let's just finish up. Right, shavik laho. So it would make you leave. Right, you would abandon the sukkah and leave. Benafik and leave. Amarav Nachanan Baraba. Right, Hani Hizme Vihige. Okay, what about brambles and thorn bushes? Okay, Mesachachinbo. One could use that for score. Abayima Vihizme Mesachachin. Again, Abai tells us with brambles we could use. Bahage, but thorn bushes, lo Mesachachin. Mai Tama, what's the reasoning? Kevan din natre trafaihu shavik le v'nafik. Again, what would happen? All right, you would, they might fall off, and who knows what would fall into your soup. That's right. All right, and therefore you would leave. All right, so we're going to stop there. All right, that's about 4 lines, right? 4, 5.